Hello and welcome to Book of the Mouse Club, episode 76, Friday, June 3rd, 2022.
Morning, monsieur.
Where are you off to?
The bookshop. I just finished the most wonderful story about a beanstalk and an ogre and
That's nice. Marie! The baguettes! Hurry up!
I'm sorry, but how can one possibly pay attention to a book with no pictures in it?
My dear child, there are a great many good books in this world without pictures.
I almost bounced clear out of the book. Some bouncing, huh?
Come home or make myself known.
J. Thaddeus Turtle, Esquire. Have you never met him? You will find his story in this delightful little book, The Wind and the Willows.
I've come to return the book I borrowed.
Finished already?
Oh, I couldn't put it down. Have you got anything new?
Welcome back. I'm your host, Courtney, and I am joined, as always, by the chocolate dipping sauce to my Disneyland churro, my lovely co-host, Emily.
You know, Courtney, I am more of a Mickey pretzel and cheese kind of gal, but I'm going to admit there is something about a churro in Disneyland that just hits differently.
I completely agree on both fronts, and today's guest is a churro aficionado for sure. On this episode, we're celebrating a first for Book of the Mouse Club, our first poetry collection. Joining us to discuss this recent book at the corner of fantasy and Maine, Disneyland, Midlife, and Churros is Nebraska State Poet Matt Mason. Matt serves as our guide from the hub of Disneyland and beyond through each land, iconic attractions, and the most magical midlife crisis on Earth. Outside of this publication from the Old Mill Press, his work can be found on NPR's Morning Edition, the New York Times, American Life and Poetry, and countless other journals and anthologies. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So before we talk about your book, I think we need to know why you love churros so much. It's in your title. It's in the first, there's a huge blown up picture of a churro in the first 2 pages. Of all Disney snacks, why is the churro superior?
The churro is it's just my favorite. Anytime I'm also a diabetic, so I have to be careful about certain things. But when I'm at Disneyland, I do so much walking, and it seems like every time my blood sugar is low, I'm like 5 steps from a churro cart. So it's just the fates have brought me to the churros.
And they are better at Disneyland because I
they
did
are.
not understand the churro hype. Being a Florida resident, I was like, we have churros, they're okay. But my former college program roommate, who is a California native, we reunited at Disneyland a few years after our college program, and she bought me a churro because she insisted you have to have the Disneyland difference.
Yeah, that's what I've heard, and I love the Disneyland churros, and it's hard because they have churros out in downtown Disney, and they just had a churro day with that, and it's like, well, but they're downtown Disney churros, not the land churros, because the land churros are far superior.
You got to pay the entry to the gate to get the churros.
It's worth it.
Pay your rights to have the churro, and you have 2 churro poems in your book, Song of Your Churro, and he hits the churro cart. So I think it does deserve a place in its title, since you talk about churros twice. They get 2 full poems. I love it.
Yeah, 2 full poems and at least 1 or 2 other mentions. So
yes, caught those as well. And as I shared in the intro, you are the first poet on the show, so we would like to know what drew you to this writing medium.
I have been writing poetry since I was in high school, and is just a way of kind of dealing with the world and, what we're all going through in high school, which is a lot of emotion, a lot of hormone, a lot of bodily and worldly changes. And when I put that down as a poem, for whatever reason, it seemed to help me make more sense of it. And ever since, I've just been writing and teaching poetry and find myself as the state poet of Nebraska. So poetry has been very good to me.
I have a brief question. So I'm a high school teacher, and I know when my students have hit the poetry unit in their English classes, because some kid gets frustrated, or they're like, I have to write a poem, but in the shape of a bird or something. Interesting. Like, you're seeing those where they're like in a picture, but it's with words, and they just get frustrated. So with your work with students and people around Nebraska teaching and talking about poetry and sharing your love of it, what do you think schools sometimes miss?
I think schools sometimes misses. We are taught to misunderstand poetry, and we're kind of taught poetry is something that's smarter than us. And I think the way we need to teach it is that poetry is fun, it is entertaining, it is interesting. So I think it's better for teachers to not teach what's in the unit, but teach like a poem that they actually like from wherever they've come across it. You show that kind of interest in poetry and the student gets that. But it's hard to pick apart, Ode on a Grecian Urn by Keats is a wonderful poem. But if you're in high school or junior high, it's not. So, yeah, it's really being able to show kids the energy and not intimidating by having them pick it apart in a way that frustrates them. That's what I like. I just like going in and using poetry as something that's entertaining and hopefully fun for them.
I always enjoy reading poetry. I try to read it aloud.
Yeah.
Even if I'm just whispering it to myself, because I do find there's a pace and a rhythm to poetry that doesn't exist in history or fiction prose that I pick that up more when I'm reading it aloud, especially.
Yeah. And I mean, that's where poetry comes from. It was an oral art form, and it's meant to be read aloud, I think. At least, I mean, there are different kinds of poetry, of course, but I really am drawn to poems that you read out loud and really get into the sound of it and the rhythm of it, like you said.
So also part of Courtney's intro, we're curious to know, and I'm sure you get asked this a lot, but how do you become the Nebraska State Poet and what does that role and responsibility entail?
Well, it's basically a Lifetime Achievement Award for poetry, I suppose. I've been doing poetry around the state for, 25 years. Through things like the Nebraska Arts Council or Humanities Nebraska or the Library Commission, other arts agencies. And you just, and also publishing work. And I've done work for the State Department in other countries. And it all just kind of adds up. And there's a process to decide a state poet who has a 5-year term. And I was a finalist the previous time, and then was selected this most recent one.
Well, congratulations on that. It sounds like such a unique thing, like a great resume item, and I'm sure a conversation starter, as it has been for us. But we'd like to move into the book itself, and we'll start at the title. Could you tell us more about the title?
Yeah, as I was writing these poems, there were some poems that I really had fun with where, some of the poems kind of came up organically from some experience in Disneyland or some idea I had about Disneyland, and others came from looking at, basically you look at a map of Disneyland and see where the different lands intersect. And it's just kind of fun to examine those little territories. And one of my favorites of them ended up being, just that little spot where Mainstreet just about gets to the castle where those two lands meet. And that poem ended up being, I think, a really good, that's a good title for the whole collection.
Yeah, I instantly knew what you meant by At the Corner of Fantasy and Maine. Like, they're very distinct Disney pieces. And I enjoyed the growing element of reflecting back on different trips to Disney, this point of being in your midlife. And I would like to know, how do you see Disney now in midlife compared to when you were a child?
Yeah, well, this whole project came when I hit, there's a poem in it that details it, and it's all true, as ridiculous as it sounds. But I basically turned 49 and woke up one day just thinking about Disneyland, like obsessively, and looking up YouTube videos and listening, subscribing to podcasts and reading articles and buying books. And after a couple months of this, my wife is also a poet, and she asked, she could see this going on as much as I'm trying to hide it. And she asked, are you writing about it? And I was like, no, because I just, I didn't know what this was. I didn't know why this was happening. I felt kind of strange about it. But she's like, you're a writer, right? So I started writing, and it turned into just the most fun project I've ever come across. Because what it ends up being is that whole midlife, whatever obsessive thing wasn't coming out of nowhere. And by writing these poems, figured out that Disneyland is kind of a touchstone for these different parts of my life. From when I was a kid there with my parents, to when I was a college student there with friends, to in recent years with my wife and kids. And it's all, Disneyland changes, but it's it's basically the same sidewalks, the same walkways, all that. So it became it's become this place for me that all these different parts of my life come together, and it's just so much fun to write about and explore that.
Are you talking about that first poem, Fast Pass to the Abyss?
Yes.
Okay. So we wanted to ask, one of our questions was looking at, I really liked how you framed from the beginning to the end. So I guess my overall question here is, since you touched on it, that first poem, Fast Pass to the Abyss, where did you want us to start with you on this journey? And then by the time we get to your last poem, Yesterday's Heat, what do you want us to walk away with?
Yeah, I want you to start in confusion of, kind of that old trope of some dude with a midlife crisis and Disneyland and confusion. And that's really where it starts. And through the book, by bringing in different experiences and really getting to the point of being there with other people that, that I love in my life, and my parents having passed away and missing them and remembering them at Disneyland and all that. By the end, I want it to come to a certain amount of peace. I think the whole book comes together a couple poems before that very end, and then I wanted it to end just on that kind of moment of calm and peace, of heading home in a good way from Disneyland.
Well, I enjoyed the journey that you took us on, and I always like to have pictures in books, especially when it's something so personal. And so I noticed that you had a few throughout there. They were also tied to some of the poems of discovering those older photos. If you could elaborate for our listeners, what did these photographs mean to you, and how did you decide which photos to include?
Well, some of them were selected by the press, and some of them were photos by me that play into different poems in the book. There's one where I'm a tiny little kid, and unfortunately it's not in color, or you could see how yellow and blue these pants are. They're amazing. Yellow and blue plaid pants. But I'm there with my mom. And then there's another photo where I'm there standing a little older, standing next to my dad. And then, another random one or two by me. But these poems play in because some of it's talking about midlife, it's talking about loss, and it's talking about, after my mom dies, having these boxes of photographs that I go through. And with the whole Disneyland obsession, I went through these boxes purposefully just trying to find the Disneyland photos. But they're boxes of photos from years ago, so it's a mess. Some of them are in their right envelopes, some of them are not. A bunch of them are just loose in the box, and so photos really play into the story in the book.
I also noticed, I'm flipping through the book right now and re-looking at the pictures. That comment you said about how Disneyland, a lot of things don't change, but you do. Things do change, but especially since you have the photos in black and white. I just came back from my first trip to Disneyland 2 months ago, and especially looking at pictures of the castle, the only evidence I have that it's not from 2022 is the fashion. But that's so cool, like thinking about memory, about how like things you experience with your family, things can be so familiar but also change so much at the same time.
Yeah. And that's kind of a magic thing of Disneyland. And I think whatever spurred this in my head to make this project happen, it all ties into exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at that first picture, Matt, age 4, the awesome pants that you said we can't see the colors. But I have a picture of me on that like bench wall ledge, and I'm like, I just sat there. It still looks just like this. Like that's so. The banners are different, but the castle really hasn't changed. Especially seeing it in black and white, like you can't tell they did like the paint color change. So like it's kind of cool that you can connect, like we can connect with you as someone reading this book, that if you've been to Disneyland, you're like, oh yeah, I've been there. I know what that is.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
And it's kind of amazing because my kids they never met my dad. He passed away in 1990, but there is it felt like there's an intersection in Disneyland. And one of the poems, the one about Dole Whips, really tries to bring that out.
I liked that one a lot. I thought I could picture just where you were referencing on either side of the Tiki Room Dole Whip counter and sitting there enjoying one, and then picturing him there beside your daughter was a nice image.
Thank you.
So at the front of your book, your foreword by Imagineer Greg Combs, I thought was very lovely and a wonderful sentiment. What led to having him be included in your book?
Just a little bit of luck. Greg Combs moved back to Omaha. He was an Imagineer and came back here, where his family's from. And a friend of mine knew I was obsessively writing a book about Disneyland, and connected us. And we had some great conversations, and he gave me just that really generous blurb.
Well, as they say, it's a small world, after all, it seems.
After all.
It walked right into that one. We do love talking about the research process with authors on our show, but this is a bit different since it's a different writing medium. Is there a research process as you write the poetry? And just in general, we'd love to know about what your writing process looks like for the book.
Yeah, well, for this book, it was a lot of research. I was listening to podcasts and watching YouTube videos and reading books and articles, really to find out more about Disneyland. And it was interesting though, because I didn't know what I was researching other than Disney. And it was just Disney, and then I narrowed it down to Disneyland primarily, because I was a little interested in other parks, but it all came back to Disneyland, and so I just kind of followed where that went, and of course had to do certain kinds of research, like go there and explore a a little bit.
That's the best research.
Yes,
it was.
For sure. I mean, take one for the team. Man, I really got to do this for the book.
It is, because I got an annual pass in 2018. The book project kind of started the previous fall. And in 2019, I had a trip there with my family and my mother-in-law in January, bought an annual pass for myself, and used it several times over the year, including I did a 2-week writing residency in Disneyland, which was awesome. Thank you, Discount Hotel Sites and Southwest Airline Miles. And yeah, I spent 2 weeks in the park, primarily by Jolly Holiday. There's a certain table on the top right tier where I would go in the morning and do writing and editing and use their Wi-Fi to send poems to submit them to magazines. And then it's nice because it's the greatest place to write, because you spend some time writing and then you got to take a break and eat a churro or a Matterhorn macaron and go ride Space Mountain.
I think that sounds like a perfect writing process.
Oh yeah, it's a great work
I think
day.
this needs to be a class that we can get 3 graduate credits for.
Any colleges out there who want to sponsor this?
Disney University, you want this class? Hire
Disney
Matt.
Institute, yeah. Lots of options.
I find this so interesting, and it doesn't surprise me, obviously, that there's a research process, but I think what I was mentioning before, the misconceptions around poetry, it's very easy to see the research when we read a history book and we discuss that with the author. We've got endnotes, we've got footnotes in the book. It's very easy to see it. Whereas through poetry, I feel more of that emotion, but there is a lot of research behind that for you to be able to express that emotion and connections to things that you're writing about.
Yeah. And you want to just get it right. You want to get the language right. I think the first draft of the Pirates on the Caribbean poem is about a little bit about the language of are these robots? Are these audio animatronics? Because when first drafts of other poems would mention other things and just call them, robots or animatronics. And then, by surrounding myself with Disney articles and podcasts, you get the language right. And that's important. And then the more you research about Waltz, you get different stories and different quotes that are really inspirational. So, I didn't just go to Disneyland for research. I went to Marceline, which is a little bit easier from Omaha because it's, 3.5 hour drive. So, also went to the Walt Disney Family Museum in San Francisco. Normally I write a poem every week from my experiences, something I see or something I hear. So ordinarily there may not be a ton of research involved in a project if it's just kind of more personal. But this one, it really started with the research before for a couple months before I started writing.
So which poem did you write first? I'm curious about how this. So we see the order that you ended up with, but which one did you write first?
Oh my God, that is a good question. I don't know. I should know this.
Let me ask my question this way then. How do you determine the order of poems in a book? Because maybe you didn't write them in the order, obviously, that they're published in. So how do you decide, like, this one needs to go after this one? How do you map that out?
For me, it comes to taking all the poems, and there were a lot more poems that made it into the book. And I take all the poems, print them out, and lay them on the floor and try to get them in order across the room. So that one poem bleeds into the next, hopefully, and that if there's information I'm trying to get across, that it does come across in the right order. And in doing it that way, some poems clearly just didn't fit anywhere next to anything. And then I would come to points where a poem that maybe I hadn't considered for the book, because actually probably the oldest poem in the book, now that I think about it, is one about memory. And it's more about memory than Disneyland. It's called Memory on page 28. It was written, I think it might be the only poem written before this whole process, but it fit so perfectly because so many parts of the book refer to memory and kind of the infallibility or the fallibility of memory, how we remember things so wrong sometimes. And it fit just beautifully at a certain point.
It's funny you mentioned the image of having all of the different drafts out on the floor. It made me think very specifically of Emily and I, who met as teaching assistants at the University of Maryland, and we worked with a professor, and she explored the concept of Frankenstein drafts, and she'd encourage, this was research papers, but encourage us to cut them up at every paragraph and then move things around as a way of visually deciding where you wanted to go. So I was like, that sounds like a Frankenstein draft to me.
Yeah. It sounds pretty similar.
Yes. And I'm interested to know if anything was on the cutting room floor. Did you cut material? How much?
There was a lot. I would guess there were another 20 poems in the project. Wow. There were a couple poems about California adventure, and that ended up not fitting in. There were a few Star Wars poems that I wanted to put in, but they just didn't work or add to the story that I had here. And there were others that just, poems stayed in the collection even if they weren't all the way together, and some of them just never came together. Because it took, I think most of the writing was done in about 2 years, and then it took another 2 years to get the order right and get the editing right, so that I think it was, at a place where it could be published.
With that many cut, I think you already have another collection on your hands. So let us know when that is out.
You got it.
I'm especially interested in these Star Wars poems. We just started Obi-Wan Kenobi on Disney Plus. So we made an event of this in my house. So we got to watch episodes 1, 2, and 3, and then we'll watch Kenobi. So once you said Star Wars poems, like that's where I am right now in my headspace. I think that'd be really cool. Star Wars collection of poetry.
I'd be for it. I've only, with those, I only have a trilogy, and they're a little bit older. But it starts, of course, with a love poem called "Make Star Love, Not Star Wars." So.
Oh, I love that. Well, hopefully we'll get to see that someday. But thinking about the order of the poems that we did get in your book, what I picked up was an alternation between personal memories, you with your family, you with your kids, and then also poems about attractions and in the parks in general. Was there a significance of going back and forth?
Yes. I really just wanted, I wanted there to be a progression through the book, but I also wanted it to be a little, to really flesh out as you go the details about Disneyland that I think are the most interesting or the most memorable. So it made more sense to me. At one point, there were different incarnations of the book where they were more grouped. But I think with the order I came to, I really like how it flows in and out a little bit, for a little bit more surprise, and I think a little bit more fun for the reader.
I picked up on that as well, the alternating. And you touched on this a little in regards to our discussion of the title, but in terms of specific places, I'd like to dig deeper. In addition to the fantasy and main of the title, you have other poems that are titled At the Corner of Blank and Blank in regards to the various lands. So what is it that interests you about the intersection between lands at Disneyland?
It's just kind of fun. By looking at it not as the land, but as the intersection, it made me look at it in a different way. And it was just a really, I think I just wrote one of those, probably. I think it was Fantasy and Tomorrow was the first one, the one with the turkey legs. It was just something that I really liked, that way of looking at Disneyland. And so it was fun to play with other intersections.
I enjoy the intersections as well. Ever since I went on the Keys to the Kingdom tour on my 16th birthday, like you have to be 16 to do that. So that was the big thing. They talked about the concrete and the little details as you seamlessly transition from land to land. So I agree. If you find yourself walking between lands, I encourage our listeners to really pay attention to those details.
Yeah, and I think it was fun too, because this book is really written for Disney fans. I think sometimes we think a book of poetry is written to be studied or whatever, and no, this I really just want Disney fans to pick it up and enjoy it.
Yeah, in your poems, I get where you have to be a fan, because some of the references that you drop, they're very specific, or you have to know like what the backside of water is or something in Jungle Cruise to like pick that up. But thinking about intersections, Courtney, one of the first books that you introduced me to that got me more into the parks. Growing up, I went to the parks very often, but I was much more of a film person. But once I was getting ready to go on my college program, Courtney's like, you need to watch this documentary. You need to read this book. And one of the first books I had, I'm looking at it, The Hidden Magic of Walt Disney World, which a lot of like the fun facts, and they tell you all the design stuff, a lot of it was about those transitions. And that's kind of, once you start to see those things, that is what makes you a park fan, when you start to see the details. And I imagine thinking about your first poem, Fast Past the Abyss, like I see you going down the rabbit hole of learning more and more. And then every time you go on a trip and you see it, it just makes you more excited. And then you go to learn some more, which then you bring back with you to your next trip.
Yeah. Though, it made me really wish in the whole research process that I'd had access to your author from 2 episodes ago, who had all those great Walt steps around Disneyland, and you'd made the scavenger hunts. There's so many great little items are in Disneyland. It's so fun to look for them and to find them and kind of discover new things that seem new to you.
So this is what our class is going to be. You're going to teach the part of how to write and using the physical space around you as inspiration. And to start us off, we're all going to go on a scavenger hunt. And then between the 2 of us, we have a writing class.
Oh, this would be the greatest writing class ever, I think. So, yeah, I'm in.
And I'm just enrolled in it and happy to be there.
Courtney, use your social media skills and get people to sign up.
No, I'm literally, that wasn't snarky. I am just happy to be there. I would really enjoy that class.
So let's talk about some attractions. Those were some really fun poems, and I hope we can talk about some specific ones as well, referencing different attractions. So want to know which Disneyland attraction is your favorite and was inspirational to you when writing?
Oh, I mean, the one that I think it pops up the most too, but Space Mountain.
Yes.
That's just my favorite.
You just make Courtney so happy.
I'm right there with you. That is where I did my Disney college program. So not at Disneyland, but at Walt Disney World, the original Space Mountain. So I started my Disney journey there for a few months, and then recently was proposed to in front of Space Mountain. So it is extra special now.
Awesome. Well done.
So we wanted to talk about some of our favorite poems. So I think that leads into, no surprise, mine was Space Mountain. I liked that. I felt that it captured. I really liked the last few lines about the galaxy's ecstatic exhalation against your face. And I am always one to ask for the front row on Space Mountain, so I could really just feel that.
I liked Mr. Toad's immediately just goes, is a hell of a ride, because I just immediately laughed. So getting to ride it again, my trip to Disneyland recently, I haven't been able to ride Mr. Toad's Wild Ride in Walt Disney World for a long time when it closed. So coming back to that attraction, like I realized how much of it I didn't remember other than that you end up in hell. That was all I remembered. I was like, I just remember a flames and like a devil face, but that's about it. So that was a fun one to read, just coming back from that trip and getting to ride this attraction that I haven't written since childhood. That was a fun one for me.
Yeah, such a fun, weird ride. So
it makes no sense. My boyfriend, he wrote it with me, and I'm making him into a Disney fan. We're working on it.
Slowly but surely.
Slowly but surely. He's got 3 trips under his belt now. But he has never seen Mr. Toad, Ichabod, none of that. So he goes into this blind, and he comes off and he's like, what was that? I was like, you don't know, but my heart is so happy right now.
Did he like it?
He did. He was like, it was wild. He's like, the car is cool, and like he liked the creepy element, because I think we're losing some of that like scary, like Snow White's Scary Adventure has been altered a little bit. And he liked the darkness, whereas Disneyland rides still have some of that eeriness to it, whereas I think Disney Worlds have all kind of moved away from that and have been more happy Fantasyland versus like Grimm's Fairy Tale Fantasyland, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So he enjoyed that portion of it a lot. He's like, I have no idea what's happening, but it doesn't, or same with like Pinocchio has that eerie element to it with Stromboli, and he also did not remember that either. He hasn't watched that movie in forever, but he liked that Disneyland still has that.
I like to rope drop Fantasyland when I go to Disneyland for that exact reason. I think that was my advice to you, Emily. I was like, just go to Fantasyland first, because it's so charming. It feels very different from the Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World's Fantasyland. So lots of fun there, and it was nice to see some references to it throughout the collection. This may be asking you like to pick your favorite child, but did you have a favorite poem or one that feels very special to you?
It really just depends on the day, probably. There's so many that I've really enjoyed, different aspects of. So it's a tough call. I might say, like, okay, so today's choice would be the one with the Dole Whip poem, but at the corner of adventure and frontier. That's today's choice. So
I have a couple questions about some of your poems. So, poem review composed on Disneyland's Pirates of the Caribbean. When you say composed on, do you mean like you wrote, like, on the ride?
Yes.
You were writing?
I was, yes.
How? It's dark. You go down two slopes.
Hang on.
Yeah. Hang on. Be careful. And use a lot of pages because you can't see the paper. So I ended my ride with several pages of really confusing scribbles, and just worked on it to put it together into a poem.
Unfortunately, Emily did not get to ride Pirates of the Caribbean at Disneyland, which is the superior Pirates of the Caribbean, because it was
I heard.
closed.
I was so sad.
Excuse to go back for this class, and then we all get to ride
That's
a poem.
okay. So there's our first trip. We need to do some scouting here.
Here we go.
Definitely.
And put it together. Another poem I had questions about. Hang on, I have to go back. I'm scrolling through here. This captured, because I teach history, I teach government and politics. Karl Marx's brain explodes a little by the time he hits the churro cart. So I lied. There's 3 poems to churros. Please enlighten. I loved this so much. I say Karl Marx's brain would explode by the time he hit the churro cart, capitalistic. All of that is one word. I need some background. How did you come to this? What do you see that inspired this?
I'm trying to think of what made that jump out to me. I think it was when I was there for like 2 weeks, and just started to see bizarre things around me and getting tired and imagining Karl Marx wandering through Disneyland. And, also, doing research and finding quotes by different folks, like, Khrushchev when he wanted to go to Disneyland and the U.S. government didn't let him, or all these other different things. And it just kind of came out.
I had a similar question about systemic oppression and Goofy. Was there a moment where you saw Goofy and Pluto and these questions were raised?
No, that one wasn't written in the park. I was at home, and it was just one of those things that hits. Because, it's one of those, I think I'd listened to a podcast where they were debating whether Goofy was a cow or a dog. It's like, he's a dog, he's not a cow. But just, it made me ponder Goofy's existential nature. And, there's the bit, I think it's from Goonies, where they're talking about Goofy and Pluto and all that. It's just one of those things that when you think about it, just gets weird.
You can't think about it. You have to accept it as fact.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what you're asked to do.
I think my favorite poem, and maybe this has to do with coming back from my recent trip, was Certainty. You were in Disneyland months ago, haven't deleted the app yet. Check now and then for the wait time on Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. I have 100% done that 3 times since I've been back from I still have the app on my phone, even though I've downloaded all of our pictures. I don't have plans yet to go back anytime soon, but I do check the times when I'm bored. I'm like, I wonder what things are like in Disneyland right now. So I really resonated with Certainty because I'm like, I do this. And this is the hallmark of a Disney Parks fan.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm glad it works right for you.
You know what? Let's check right now. What is the wait time at Big Thunder Mountain? I will pull that up. We got this 45-minute wait.
Wow.
45. That could be worth it if you don't have a fast pass.
Lightning lane now.
Oh, sorry. Yes, lightning lane.
Yeah.
Well, before we close up with our 2 questions for every authors, I was wondering if you would be interested in reading one of your poems for our listeners, since, as Emily said, it should be enjoyed aloud?
Definitely. Let me read. Well, let's read certainty.
Okay.
Certainty. You were in Disneyland months ago. Haven't deleted the app yet. Check now and then for the wait time on Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, even though you're in line at McDonald's in Omaha. You could be in the Haunted Mansion in 13 minutes if you weren't. You wonder about your arteries. You pay for a quarter pounder, ponder the inevitables of death and taxes, and the line for Peter Pan's flight is 40 minutes long.
That is also always certain. That's why you got to rope drop it. Thank you so much for reading that.
Could I make one request?
Yeah.
Sure. And actually, what is the wait time on
Yes.
Peter Pan right now?
Go, Emily,
Check my
go.
accuracy.
Peter Pan is all. I still have the app open. Peter Pan is 45 minutes.
So close.
I'm off.
Space Mountain is 20.
Oh my gosh, I would be running there in a full sprint right now.
Matterhorn is 40. It's a light day at Disneyland right now, because even Rise of Resistance is 50.
Wow.
I think we need to get on a plane right now.
Yeah.
It'll still be open by the time we get there, right?
I gained 3 hours heading that way, so
That's
yeah,
true.
it's
We can make it.
fine. Emily, what was your request?
So I'm curious about this poem. What you find at Disneyland is, because it is a full block of text. So I have a question about, maybe this is an overarching question that I've kind of always wanted to ask a poet. How do you determine the shape of your words, and not like the assignments I see my kids were like, I'm writing a poem about love, so I'm putting it in the shape of a heart. But I noticed that your verses do look different in length, in size. There's spaces, but this one is a full block.
Yeah.
So what are the intentions behind that? And then if you wouldn't mind reading what you find at Disneyland is. I like that one a lot too.
I do too. Well, this poem is basically the heart of the whole book. This is what everything leads up to. This is where, it's kind of the enlightenment moment of why did I wake up obsessed with Disneyland? And it talks a little bit about the process, but I wanted it to look different because it is such an important poem. I want it to stand out visually as well as, informationally. And, I like how it's set in the book where it stands by itself with a photo across from it. The whole poem is just like, it's one long run-on sentence, and it's just meant to be kind of one long thought that just kind of bursts out on the page. And that's what I'm hoping to do with the kind of paragraph-like form of it. So with that, what you find at Disneyland is that when you came here on a trip by yourself and investigate why you can't stop thinking about the place, and had thought maybe it was the park itself and Walt and all his stories, is that you were wrong, and you're here because of you and all the stories you've been part of on trips made here in past years to this cheerful once upon an orange grove. And it's like pulling out boxes from the basement and trying to fit into clothes from different ages of your life, and you can't, with them small or faded or so brittle they splinter apart like straw, or just out of fashion, because you can't be 4 or 25 or 46 ever again. You have to walk with one stiff elbow, the toe and heels that hurt, all these small pains that now take ages to soothe. You can't change any of this except maybe that gut, but man, you've come to exactly the wrong place for that. When there are churro carts, peanut butter dipped in chocolate, 1,000 sweet things shaped like Mickey Mouse's head, there is a legendary sandwich you find to be ham and cheese wedged inside of something more funnel cake than bread. You came here to ride Space Mountain and find answers, but the answers aren't on roller coasters. They're in the rhythm of your body's aches as you hike up Disneyland Drive, thinking about trips with your daughters, wife, parents, friends you find yourself walking without. You're in the middle of your life, halfway to the next. Don't you dare waste a breath.
so nice to hear it aloud. Now I wish I had it as an audiobook. Thank you for that. And we're glad you haven't wasted your breath in talking with us here today. As we wrap up, we do have 2 questions that we like to ask. So I will pose the first, and that is, what is a personal favorite Disney book that you would like to recommend?
You know, the one that comes to mind first is Disneyland Hotel by Don Ballard. It's a book when I was doing all the research, it came up on a podcast, but it was a book that was out of print at the time. So you could buy it on Amazon for like $300 used or something like that. And then it was just re-released by the Old Mill Press. So I was able to get a copy. It didn't get used for the book. If I'd gotten it earlier, I probably would have squeezed a Disneyland Hotel poem out, because I stayed there that first trip there, the 1973 one, was with my parents, and we stayed at the Disneyland Hotel. And even though I remember nothing about it, there's still something there, because it really draws me to this book.
Well, that is a book that we have not been recommended yet. So, Courtney, that's a new one for our shelves.
Always growing.
So, Courtney, I'm going to deviate here a second from our 2 questions for our authors. Because I would like to know, do you have a favorite poet or someone that you would like to recommend that maybe you think listeners will enjoy?
Yeah, there's so many great poets, right? I mean, poetry got so kind of complicated and difficult in some fashions, but there's a lot of poets out there just doing beautiful work. Folks like Denise Duhamel, who's a Florida poet. Oh, Patricia Smith, who's a little bit harder, but fantastic. Just a stunning writer. Ted Kooser is a good Nebraska poet. He was U.S. Poet Laureate for a little bit, and I absolutely adore him. So, so many great poets I run across at open mics and poetry slams who don't have books out. But it's worth looking in your local community and finding the poetry readings and the events and finding young poets, because there's so many people out there just writing brilliant stuff right now.
And speaking of writing, what advice would you have for someone who aspires to write poetry?
Just do it. Don't write what you think a poem is supposed to look like or be, because we get caught in our own heads because we can't write like Robert Frost or John Keats or Emily Dickinson. And write the poems that you wish you had when you were in class. If you would have walked into high school poetry class and there were poems about Spider-Man and that would have got you into it, you need to write those poems. Kind of like with this book, I resisted writing this book because I just thought, no, what am I going to do with poems about Disneyland? No Disney publisher is going to want to publish something about poetry, and no poetry publisher is going to want to publish something about Disney. But it doesn't matter. Just write what you think is interesting, whether you think it's poetry or not, and see what happens.
Well, I hope that leads to other poetry collections for us to discuss in the future. But in the meantime, next up for us is an annual tradition on Book of the Mouse Club, our summer reading series. This year, we let you, our listeners, decide between Disney legend autobiographies and Star Wars via polls on our Twitter and Instagram profiles. So thank you to everyone who engaged with that. And the response was overwhelmingly in favor of Disney legends. So we are proud to present to you our legendary summer series. We'll kick things off later this month with Forever Young, a memoir by Haley Mills. And here's a brief description from Amazon. Quote, iconic actress Haley Mills shares personal memories from her storied childhood, growing up in a famous acting family and becoming a Disney child star, trying to grow up in a world that wanted her to stay forever young, end quote. So we can't wait to start this summer series with you in just a few weeks. In the meantime, of course, you can keep up with Book of the Mouse Club on Twitter and Instagram at Book of the Mouse. Email us with comments or ideas to bookofthemouseclub@gmail.com. And please be sure to leave us a review on iTunes so others can find our podcast and read and listen along with us. You can keep up with me, Courtney, on Instagram at GreatGuthsby and Twitter at Courtney_Guth.
And you can keep up with me, Emily, on Instagram and Twitter at the same handle, at Emily_McD. And Matt, where can our listeners connect with you, and where is the best place to engage with your work?
You can find me. I've got a website at matt.midverse.com. You can also find me on Facebook, facebook.com/NESP for Nebraska State Poet 3, because I'm the third Nebraska State Poet. You can also look at theoldmillpress.com and find my book and all of that.
Great. We will be sure to include all of that in the show notes. And as our guest of honor today, you get to close us out with a quote. So what have you chosen for us?
I've chosen a quote that I really love. It's by Walt Disney, where he said in 1938, "To tell the truth, more things of importance happened to me in Marceline than have happened since or are likely to in the future." I just love that quote. It's talking about Marceline, Missouri, this guy who's been living in California and lived, Kansas City previously, but had done all these amazing things. And the most important years of his life were those, early years when he was a kid.
I feel like it has a lot of the same themes of your poems, of reflecting back on those memories as you reach a certain point in your life. So we are so grateful for you to share those moments with us today. Thank you again for joining us.
Hey, thank you, Emily. Thank you, Courtney. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks. And I look forward to our class together where everyone's going to eat churros and do scavenger hunts and write poems about it.
Of the Mouse Club has no affiliation with the Walt Disney Company. The views and opinions expressed by hosts and participants are theirs and theirs alone. They do not represent the organizations or companies they happen to work for.